Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Focus, episode 200, the review for The Fantastic Four: First Steps. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen of the North, South, East, and West, and welcome to another episode of Film Focus. I'm your host, Hypersonic55, and I'm glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. And here we are towards the end of July, and Marvel have just recently released the new Fantastic Four. Now, if you know me, I've been looking forward to this film with hype, but also trepidation at the same time, because the Fantastic Four are some really cool characters, and while I've never actually read one of the comics from like the official line, I have read comics with them in it. So, certain Avengers or like crossover stories where they happen to be featured, I've definitely read them in there and I have enjoyed their characters quite a bit. There's also certain places like some of the video games like the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, or certain stuff in the animation department which I've enjoyed. But when it comes to film, unfortunately, the Fantastic Four have not fared too well. You have the bootleg, unreleased, sort of released 90s Roger Corman film, which, depending on who you talk to, was either really bad or a pretty decent rendition for the time. But then we move on to 2005, where we had the first proper adaptation of the Fantastic Four in terms of the Tim Story film. And at the time, I was 15. I enjoyed it for what it was. I thought that Michael Chiklis and Chris Evans as the Thing and the Human Torch fared pretty well, and I thought it was a decent starting point. I never thought the film was amazing. It definitely didn't compare to my joyful experiences with Spider-Man 2 and X-Men 2 in the 2 previous years beforehand, but I thought, okay, there's enough going on here where we could do well with a sequel. Then 2007 came around with Rise of the Silver Surfer, the sequel, and I remember seeing the trailer for that film so many times with the Silver Surfer and that chase scene with him and the Human Torch. I thought that was bloody incredible. I thought the film was going to be amazing. But alas, it was not. The film became very frustrating very quickly, and even though there were certain elements in that film that I think did better than the first film, at the same time, it was somehow worse in terms of certain things with the characters, with the story, the dialogue, and Galactus, in quotation marks, was just a big fat cloud, a horrible cloud. And then, for some weird reason, when Green Lantern came around in 2011, they decided to copy the weird homework of, Rise of the Silver Surfer and turn Parallax into a big fart cloud. I was like, what is going on with these space movies and clouds? But anyway, no good. And then Fan Four Stick, as it's been dubbed by like certain people, aka the last Fantastic Four film from 2015. Can't believe that film was almost 10 years old now. That one was coming from Chronicle director Josh Trank. Almost forgot his name there. After Chronicle, I was very excited to see what he would do with the Fantastic Four film and with the direction they were choosing to go with, something a little bit more horror inspired, and with the cast that they had assembled. I was like, okay, this could be pretty interesting. But straight from the outset, when the trailer came around, I was like, I don't know if I'm on board with this. Again, we were still coming into that era where things were trying to be all dark and gritty and, different from what came before. And again, I was wanting to put my trust in Josh Trank that he'd turn something out cool, but the behind-the-scenes drama about that film was so hard to miss. It was everywhere. The amount of reshoots, the stuff that you heard about Josh Trank being on set or not being on set, the fact that the film was cobbled together and then thrown out there for the world to see, and then he had like some sort of breakdown online saying that this was not the film that he chose to make, that the film was taken away from him in the editing process, all this stuff and loads more that I can't get into right now. At the time, I thought the film wasn't great, but not bad. But the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? I was actually wrong. This film is pretty bad. I wouldn't say offensively bad to me, because again, it takes a lot for a film to really irk me. But I would say, it's just one of the sort of films that you don't need to watch again. Hence why I've never looked back at it since I saw it in the cinema. But anyway, fast forwarding to the MCU. As you know, since Endgame, we've been in this weird ebb and flow of decent to not so good material. And there's only like maybe a handful of things that the MCU have done in film and TV that I would actually say is proper bad. But clearly most people have checked out the MCU just due to this lack of quality control that's come out in the last 4 years. Yeah. Since they started releasing stuff in 2021. But yeah, point is, we've been looking forward to, well, those of us are still holding out hope. We've been looking forward to Marvel at least bringing out something that would revitalize the brand. And I feel like Thunderbolts, to a degree, put in some good faith that like Marvel was still trying and still attempting to do things that made you want to care about the characters and care about what was coming next. And Fantastic Four, I think, basically ups that. This film has the most amount of flavor that the MCU has put out for a while. And again, with the exceptions of stuff like Guardians 3, Shang-Chi, and Spider-Man No Way Home, excluding, you know, the TV projects and all that, this film feels like there's heart, there's care, there's attention being put into this. And it's easily the most accessible of the Marvel films for a while because it's not really attached to anything else. It's in its own separate universe, and there's not really that much you really need to go into this film to understand what's going on. It's fairly straightforward and it's delightful. I had a good time with this film. I can't hide it. I wouldn't say the film is perfect, but I don't have any major criticisms, which is really odd. I may have some points that I can bring up later on, but for now, we'll just get into the review proper. So as we do with the podcast, we talk about the story, characters, presentation, and overall conclusions. So without further ado, let's jump in. So let's talk about the story, and it can be summed up as the following. The Fantastic Four are a group of individuals who are not only superheroes, but also a family unit. After the incident in space that gave them their powers, they became heroes and have tackled everything that they've come across since then. They are beloved and are known by everybody within the New York area, and things are going pretty well. However, one day the planet is greeted by an extraterrestrial being known as the Silver Surfer, who tells them that their planet has been chosen to be consumed by a greater being known as Galactus, and they have a very short space of time before the planet is basically doomed. So the Fantastic Four have to come together and come up with a plan in order to stop this from happening. And that is a way for me to summarize the story without going into the area of spoilers. And yeah, I quite enjoyed the story for this film. It was simple yet effective and went in some directions I wasn't expecting. And I really enjoyed how it really highlighted the fact that the film was about trust, hard choices, sacrifice, courage in the face of the unknown, and of course, family. Now, Marvel films for me are at their best when I care about the characters and the story that they're involved with. And over the last few years, we've had little moments like that here and there with certain properties, but I feel like this is the first film for a while which has really emphasized the nature of the story being contingent on what happens with these characters, what they do, and how they choose to execute their plans. And there were a few moments where I found myself genuinely, shocked, surprised, and, tense, and just wondering what was going to happen next, because some of these scenarios do feel very grand and beyond the scope of what has been seen before in some cases, and you just kept wondering, ooh, how are these guys going to make it out of this situation? It was crazy. And one thing that I quite enjoyed was the fact that the Fantastic Four, for the first time on screen at least, felt like their cosmic counterparts in the comics. In the previous films, everything felt so earth-based, earthbound, and the Fantastic Four are known for their space-based adventures, so the fact that we actually got to get off-world and really get to explore space and get into these crazy, over-the-top scenarios, I was like, yo, okay, this actually feels like the space-traveling superheroes that I'm aware of in the comics. Some of the scenarios they were in was mad, and I really enjoyed seeing that. And similar to Superman that came out a couple weeks ago, I feel like this film embraces the weird, campier and just more comic booky elements that make the characters who they are. I would say, if anything, the only nitpicks I probably have is that this film definitely has an element of waiting and seeing to see how certain things play out. I would say there's not as much forward momentum in terms of the superhero characters and the villains doing certain things. So I can understand how in some people's minds some of this could come across as boring, but for me, I was fully locked in, I was having a good time, and by the time it was over, I was very curious to see where the story would go after that. And just in terms of the post-credit scenes, I will mention that there are two. The mid-credit scene is definitely pretty decent. The one afterwards is just another one of those, it's okay, but you don't necessarily have to stay for it. Alright, and now it's time to talk about the characters, and I thought that they were all great. I really like what was done with everybody on screen, and you can see why they were picked for these roles. Whether it was individually or as part of a group, they all felt so good and authentic, and that was one of the key things that I really enjoyed. It's been heavily emphasized in the marketing that this is a group of superheroes who are also a family. It is really well done in the movie. This feels like a group that's known each other for a while, and they have unique and different dynamics for certain pairings or the group as a whole. But most importantly, you can feel the love and care that they have for each other, so when they are in these more quieter moments or facing the bigger danger of their lives, you really care what happens to them. So let's start with Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards. Now, I know there were a good few people on the internet that was questioning his casting, me included. I wasn't like saying, oh yeah, he's a terrible Reed Richards. It's more so he just didn't come across as a Reed Richards to me, but seeing what they did with him in the film, I was quite pleased. Reed is a character who has many, many interesting facets to him. And as a smart individual, he has a different mindset from the people surrounding him. And I feel like this film did a great job of highlighting how smart he was, but also showing how vulnerable he was at the same time. For as smart and pragmatic as he is, sometimes he's not emotionally intelligent, and his need to focus on his work and protect people can come at the expense of hanging around with his family and, being there for them when they need him. But again, Pascal, he's just wonderful to watch on screen, and I loved what he did, not only individually, but his stuff with Vanessa Kirby was grand. And getting to see a version of Reed Richards with stretchy powers that didn't look as bad as what's come before was pretty good as well. But yeah, we need to talk about Vanessa Kirby now as Sue Storm, because she was the MVP of the film, and I love her so much. Now, there is a bit of bias because I have been a big fan of Vanessa Kirby since she showed up in Mission Impossible Fallout, but she genuinely did a good job here. She had great poise and screen presence, and I enjoyed how caring but also powerful she came across in the movie as well. Sue Storm is one of those people with her power set. She is capable of so much more than what we've seen in the films, and I feel like we definitely get to see more of her powers, but also more of her as a character. The way that she interacts with several individuals and is almost like a co-lead in terms of the leader of the group. I just love what was done with her. She was great. She was wonderful. And yeah, moving on to Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm. I thought he was really good. I liked his portrayal of Johnny Storm in the sense that, again, he came across as a lot smarter of an individual than he has in previous adaptations, and he was a little bit more aware of people's feelings. He wasn't so much of a jerk as he has been in previous ones, and I just enjoyed his character. I thought it was like a nice change of pace from what came before. And while I will still have, nostalgic love for Chris Evans as the Human Torch, I think that this new version was pretty cool as well. And of course, we need to talk about Ebon Moss-Bachrach as Ben Grimm, aka The Thing. I thought he did a really good job in this film as well. While I was initially, questioning the choice to not have like a more gruff voice for Ben Grimm, I did like what he did in this film, where he was tough, but he also had a softer side. You can see that he'd adjusted to, being this character. And while there was definitely, a little bit more going on with him under the surface, I liked how he felt like the glue that was holding the team together. And his dynamic with Johnny was great, as well as his scenes with Reed. And again, he just seemed to be the perceptive one who was always just paying attention where others weren't. And I also really liked Julia Garner as the Silver Surfer. This version of Silver Surfer, who is Shalabal, at least I think that's how you say her name. She was really cool. I have been aware of the female Silver Surfer for a while now, but I can't remember if I've actually read any of the material that she's been featured in when it comes to the comics, but she was awesome. She had a really good screen presence, and I love several of the action sequences that she was kept in, and the way that she had her story play out was cool, and the interactions she had with Johnny Storm especially were really nice. Great job, really enjoyed her. We also have Ralph Ineson as Galactus. Yo, Galactus was cool, man. This is pretty much the Galactus I have always wanted to see since I saw that pre-rendered cutscene in Marvel Ultimate Alliance #1 from 2006. I think that's the year that game came out. He had a great screen presence, and Ineson's voice, it was very intimidating, very nice, wonderful stuff. And the only other person worth mentioning is Paul Waterhauser as Mole Man. He was pretty fun in the movie, and I enjoyed what he did. His interactions with Sue were great. Alright, so now we talk about the presentation. This was one of my favorite aspects of the film. Visually, this film is very nice. I quite enjoyed that retro-futuristic aesthetic that this film has been going for. It has that sort of, this is what the future would look like from a 1960s point of view. And I liked how they incorporated that, but still kept certain aspects of realism in there as well. And I liked the design of the costumes, from the Fantastic Four's, you know, sort of superhero costumes to their space outfits. The costume design in general was just really, really nice, and I liked how all of the people were dressed. I also quite like the, you know, CGI overall, which was really good. The stuff in space is really nice, and the design of Galactus and the Silver Surfer hold up very, very well, especially on an IMAX screen. Yes, I saw this in an IMAX, and it was glorious. So much of the action sequences and certain things just really popped on that bigger screen. But, you know, again, Galactus looked really good. The Thing looked incredible. The way that they designed the character to not only have the, you know, more comic book accurate design, but the fact that the rocks looked so realistic but still had that nice tint of orange to it. And while obviously part of me will miss the more practical side that you got with the Tim Story films, at the same time, I think that he did a fabulous job with Ben Grimm's design in this film. There were just a couple moments here and there where the CG on him looked either not as polished, or the motion looked a little different from, I say, 90% of the rest of the film. And Johnny's flame powers look really good in the film as well. Obviously, we had a pretty good version of his powers in the Tim Story films, but I feel like they took the visual effects one step further, in the sense that while we get to see Johnny flame on and be completely illuminated in flame, at the same time it felt like there were at least a few different tiers of his flame powers being used. So sometimes he would be like completely engulfed in flames, but then sometimes it would be a little less, or there would be only a part of him that would be engulfed in flame. And it was just really nice to see the different subtleties and the amount of illumination coming off of him, and how they highlighted extra elements of his fire, where he was more orange with like a redder hue when he wasn't as illuminated essentially. But yeah, again, some of the stuff that you get to see with some of the action scenes in space was so cool and had such a great level of scope to him. And we can't talk about this film without highlighting the wonderful score from my boy Michael Giacchino. Anyone who knows me knows how much I gush about this dude and his music. He is one of my all-time favorite film composers, and I knew that once he was put onto this project, he would do a good job, and he killed it for me. I like how this film score feels like it takes several elements of film scores that I've liked from him before, like The Incredibles, Star Trek, and Doctor Strange, but then has mashed them all together into this score that feels like it can be subtle, heartfelt, and pretty, but also bombastic, crazy. And he does that cool thing where he brings in the backing vocals with the choir, and they're all hype as hell during some of these crazier action scenes and bigger moments towards the end of the film, where I'm like, yo, Michael gets it. His compositions are wonderful, and that Fantastic Four theme song is probably the most notable theme that the MCU has had since the Avengers theme came out. And I pray to God that Marvel will be putting this kind of care and attention into the rest of their superhero characters going ahead. So in the end, I enjoyed the Fantastic Four First Steps quite a bit. It was pretty much everything that I could have hoped for when it came to the characters, the depiction of their abilities, obviously highlighting that family element, but also presenting me with a story and certain things that I didn't expect to see in the film. And I'm just very excited to see where we go with these characters. Now, I think your enjoyment of this film will vary depending on how much you buy into the characters and the story. But for me, I was locked in, and this feels like, again, we're on the road to better material with the MCU. Again, it just felt like there was more interesting and engaging stuff going on in this film than a lot of the stuff that they've put out there for the last few years. And I would encourage you guys to give it a shot. But yeah, now I'll turn it over to you guys. What did you think of the film? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And how would you say it compares to the other Marvel films that's come out in the last 4 years since, Phase 4 started? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, or hit me up on Twitter where I'm at Hypersonic55 or at FilmFocus55. Check us out on Twitter, Instagram, and other places where podcasts can be found, like SoundCloud, iTunes, and YouTube. And yeah, until the next time, this is the Hypersonic55 signing out. Peace.